Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Las Lajas Natural Process Costa Rica from Onyx Coffee Lab. And there's the bag right there. And Onyx, based out of Bentonville, Arkansas. And this coffee right here was featured in our most recent blind taste test rankings video, where it did finish 5th place out of 5 Onyx coffees on that day. And on that note, we're going to be doing our best to release a review every day for the next couple of days in the hopes that we can get all of these Onyx coffees reviewed before the Advent calendar arrives. So let's discuss this coffee a little bit, as a lot of the comments in that blind taste test rankings video were in relation to this coffee specifically, as I feel like a lot of people got the opportunity to try this coffee last year, as did we, and truth be told, it was one of my least favorite coffees of the entirety of last year, as I found this coffee to be pretty overpowering and overbearing, and a lot of people shared that same sentiment, as a lot of people said the same thing in a lot of the comments, so it's kind of interesting to revisit this coffee and see if it might be a little bit different this time around. This right here is day 11 of this coffee. And for anybody that does not know, Onyx does have a brew guide for all of their coffees on their YouTube channel. So they had a brew guide for this coffee as well, and the recipe they went with was a 16.67 to 1 water to coffee ratio at 205 degrees Fahrenheit with an extended bloom. And we brewed it through the V60. We brewed all of these coffees through the V60. And Onyx is a light medium American for the roast profile. So let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. So day 6, which was that blind taste test rankings day, and if you watch that video, then you'll see that at first the coffee felt like a slightly tamed version of last year's coffee, but then after it had cooled down, it just radiated that overpowering red raspberry wine. Cup of coffee that we had experienced last year as well made it an extremely easy cup of coffee to pick out, and of course that resulted in the coffee finishing last. And it is extremely interesting watching their brew guide video, as they say in that video that this coffee is not boozy. And I know tastes are subjective, but if I could only describe this cup of coffee as one thing, I would say it's overpoweringly boozy. So I know, again, tastes are subjective, so different experiences, but that's just kind of the impression I get from this coffee. So just interesting differences in opinion on that. Day 7, lowered the temperature in the hopes that maybe I can kind of reduce the booziness that was coming from this cup of coffee, and didn't see too much of a change. The coffee is still very intense, and a lot of these notes are going to be pretty consistent, because I don't want to call this coffee one note, but it is a very overpowering and overbearing flavor that comes from this cup of coffee. If you've had this cup of coffee, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's red raspberry. It's just red raspberry wine, just straightforward in this cup of coffee. And let the bloom sit longer than normal. We tried working with their recipe through the Chemex, and even then we weren't seeing huge improvement, if any improvement. Really dominant red raspberry wine with a slight bit of vanilla in the cup on this day, and even then that secondary component is definitely very secondary to what you're experiencing first and foremost in this cup. Day 9, ran it through the V60. Coffee remained pretty consistent, extremely pronounced red raspberry wine again, and then there was a slight bit more, including a slight bit of citrus, as well as a fair bit of grain as well. This kind of cereal grainy component was in this cup of coffee, and we experienced it even more when brewed directly through the brew guide that they had. Day 10, exactly the way that it had been on their YouTube channel, and then we were still seeing a very strong and dominant cup of coffee, again that red raspberry wine, and then there was a slight bit more of the grain present in the cup, as well as a fair bit of cacao, a slight subtle vanilla as well. All of these other components that we're experiencing in this cup of coffee, again, takes very much a back seat to this very strong flavor that's coming from this cup of coffee. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And of course the thing we must discuss the most is that finish at a level 5, because this is a relative tasting wheel, so relative to a lot of other stuff that we have at a level 5, this could be even pushed up to like a level 6 or a level 7. We want to emphasize how lasting this cup of coffee is, because after I'm done recording this video and after I'm done drinking this coffee, I'm going to be tasting this coffee for another 10, 15, 20 minutes, because this coffee just lingers eternally. It is a very, very lasting cup of coffee. The berry fruit, of course, at level 5, we've been harping on how strong the berry flavor is in this cup of coffee, so yeah, that's definitely up there. The acidity at level 4, that's higher than a lot of Onyx coffees tend to be, so it's got a very lasting acidity. And then the sweetness at a level 4, because even if this cup of coffee is overpowering and overbearing, it's not overly sweet, overpowering and overbearing, so sweetness I feel like is pretty good at level 4. It's not the sweetest cup of coffee that we've had from all 5 of these Onyx coffees. And then the thing we must address, and the most important thing, is the cleanliness at a level 1. And again, very interesting in their brew guide that they say that this is a crisp cup of coffee, and that it can kind of feel like a honey process at times more than it feels like a natural process. That's not the case for me. It's got a very muddied sort of flavor profile to it, no matter what sort of adjustments I've made. And They have more experience with their coffee. They know their coffee a lot better than I'll ever know their coffee, but I've had probably 24 cups of this same coffee over the last couple of years, and it remains the same for me. I can't push the cleanliness above a level 1 because it's just such a murky, boozy flavor profile for me that anything above a 1, it's just not there for me. I can't get any sort of clarity from this cup of coffee, so I have to put that at level 1, but other than that, citrus at level 3, and I don't think that there's too much else worth discussing, as yeah, this is pretty accurate from what I've been getting from this coffee for a very long time. Alright, overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. It is my least favorite Onyx cup of coffee I've ever had. It is one of my least favorite cups of coffee I've ever had because this was the start of what was this trend, this boozy berry components to all of these coffees, and it's the coffee I think of the most when anybody says boozy berry because this was the first one I ever had that tasted like this, and it was the one that kind of, for me, started this trend of coffees that I just had a very difficult time drinking. And I don't really know what to say about this coffee other than that. I know a lot of people have tried this coffee and have had the same experience, and that's why it's so interesting that on something like a brew guide that the coffee company themselves put out, they have such a different experience. I can't explain why, so I could always just say, this is on me for not being able to get this cup of coffee right, but at the same time, you should be able to figure out a cup of coffee. I'm not a world barista champion, I'm not a world barista brewer, but at the same time, I should find a way that I can enjoy this coffee, and I've been struggling no matter how many times I've tried to find any way that I can enjoy this coffee. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to, keep those things in mind. It is a very lasting cup of coffee. It has a very strong flavor profile, very pronounced flavor profile. If you like red raspberry wine, there you go, perfect for you. You'll enjoy this cup of coffee. If you can continue to drink something like this, then this will be great for you. I know there are some people, I finally found some people that do enjoy that sort of boozy profile to their cups of coffee, so this is a great fit for you. That's kind of the way I can only leave this review. If you've by chance had an opportunity to try this year's version of Las Lajas, or even if you have any more thoughts about last year's version of Las Lajas, would love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. But this right here has been a review of the Las Lajas Natural Processed Costa Rica from Onyx Coffee Lab. Thank you for watching.